Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming to listen.
This is Nobuki's place.
My
Yeah.
place, by the way.
This is a Lucas Fist. So I'm Brandon, the host of this podcast, and these are my two friends.
That's no. You introduce yourself, man.
My name is Nobuki, and I'm a Japanese American.
Yeah,
I am Chong, and I'm Korean American.
Korean American, and then Brandon again, and then I'm half Chinese, Korean, living in America. So yeah, the goal of this podcast just is to talk about multicultural backgrounds and everything kind of about that. So yeah, let's go ahead and get right into it. So, what's your background? What's the background of
Just get straight.
being a Japanese American, being half Japanese, half white, right? So we'll start with like which parent is Japanese, which parent is white.
Yeah, for sure. So my dad is Japanese. He moved to the States in the 90s, and then my mom is white. She kind of grew up in like the Vancouver, Washington area. And so I think growing up, I think my family culture definitely had an emphasis towards the Japanese side. Like even my name's Nobuki, and I'm actually the only sibling out of all my siblings to have like a Japanese name. And so even growing up, like the reason why that was because my parents were always planning to move back to Japan.
Wait, really?
Yeah. So they're like, that's why like, the rest of my siblings are have like American names. But for my parents, I think they kind of were preparing me to move back to Japan, even though I was born in the States. And so I think that really just had like a big influence into how I see things and how even I was like raised.
Oh, what? Because what's your middle name, bro?
Yeah. So my middle name or my American name is David. I don't go by that very often.
Hey, David.
Hey, David.
It's too, I don't know. I think Nobuki, I think for me, even my name has really connected me a lot through my culture, through the years of cultural identity issues and trying to just figure out who I am, what am I, like am I Japanese, am I American? I think one of the things that really helped me stay connected to my Japanese side was my name, especially since like I look very white. So I think that's what's something that kept me like really grounded.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. So like growing up, did you think you were like more white or like more Japanese?
Honestly, I think as a kid, like to put it like I didn't see like I was just like, oh, like I'm Japanese American, and I thought that was like obvious. Like it's like hard to tell. It's like like I mean I look like kind of at least my skin color is like kind of similar to Japanese people. Especially like growing up, like I went to like a Japanese preschool, even a Japanese kindergarten, elementary school. So I was always surrounded by Japanese Americans. So I think like in my heart, and even like my first language is Japanese. I even had to take, like ESL. We're all supposed to take ESL like in elementary school. But I think for myself, I think that was just something that I think I was really confused. I think even one of my earliest memories was actually when I went to Japan, and I went to school in Japan for the first time, and there I had kids that would like point at me and say gaijin gaijin, which is like, oh, foreigner and foreigner. I had that kind of incident once where even like kids kind of like threw out rocks at me because they like saw that I was different. Yeah, and like it was just like this was like in kindergarten too. And so I think from a very young age, I think I was very aware that even though I feel very Japanese, I know that I don't look Japanese.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting to say that because for me, I would say that I'm very ethnically ambiguous. I've gone everything under the sun, whether it's Mexican, Samoan, Japanese, Chinese, Korean.
Samoan.
Yeah, I have. When I went to Hawaii, they thought I was like, so are you Samoan in high school? I'm just like, no, I have a job. I'm like, oh, great, you have a job for the summer, right? I'm like, no, full-time job.
Yeah.
And they were like, what?
Wow.
So that was also really interesting. Like also Southeast Asian, right? Like Vietnamese, Indonesian, Filipino comes up a lot too, which is really interesting. But nope. But yeah, it was always a question for me where I was always like, oh, where do I fit in? What is my culture? Who do I stand by? Because growing up for me, I would always say I'm Chinese or I'm Korean, and they're like, oh, you're not full Korean. Oh, you're not full Chinese, so you're not one of us. I'm just like, okay, then what am I? Right? Yeah.
I definitely said that to you before.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. I think we met what, like sixth grade, and you're just like, no, you're not Korean.
I don't think I said that when I was young. Did I say that when we first met?
I think you were just like,
I think I said that more when we got into college.
okay, that makes sense too.
Because I don't think I was as like a joking kind of guy like a kid when I was a kid.
Oh,
I became more of a jokester like in college.
not true.
Jokester.
Jokester. Uh-huh. Yeah. But at least for you, Jungwoo, was that ever like something you had to really like think about? Because I mean, like being full Korean is like you knew that you were Korean, right?
Honestly, I've never felt not Korean. I think I think the only times I've felt non-Korean is when I actually went to Korea, and I realized that my Korean is actually not that great. Even though I would say that my Korean is better than a lot of other Koreans here.
Because you were born there, right?
I was born in Korea and I moved here in 2007. I remember the exact date, February 7th, 2007. I still celebrate it to this day.
How old were you?
I was 7 years old, turning 8.
Oh, okay.
So, and like, I mean, my parents have always emphasized to me that I'm Korean. Whenever I would be like, oh, I'm Korean American, they'd be like, no, you're not. You're Korean. Like, don't say that. And so, like, they made sure that I continue to speak Korean, mainly because they didn't know how to speak Korean in the house. Oh, no, they didn't know how to speak English.
I was gonna say like
They didn't know how to speak English, and so I had to speak Korean in the house. And then they kind of emphasized to me and my sister that we should speak in Korean so that we continue to like not forget.
yeah.
But honestly, like I listened to more Korean music as a kid than I did American music.
Okay.
When it came to American music, I listened to Justin Bieber. People in middle school, they thought I was gay. They genuinely, like, a kid came up to me and was like, dude, are you gay? I'm like, no, like, why would you think that? He's like, you listen to Justin Bieber. But I listened to like Big Bang, 21,
Oh yeah.
Soneshide, like.
Is that Gen 1?
Huh?
Gen 1, right?
I would say that's
Gen 2.
it's hard to say Gen 1 because there were a lot of popular K-pop groups before them.
Okay.
But they are the ones who really took it like global.
Okay.
Like Big Bang took it global. But yeah, I've never not felt Korean because I went to a Korean church. And I feel like as a Korean growing up in America, I was more indulged in the Korean culture than a lot of other Korean kids.
Oh.
And so therefore, if I was with like other Korean Americans, I felt the most Korean anyway. So like there was not a moment where I was like, oh, I'm not Korean.
Yeah.
American though. I did hang out with a lot of white kids when I was in school, like elementary, middle school, and a little bit of high school.
Yeah.
Because I live in Clackamas. Clackamas is very white.
Or,
And also,
Oregon, yeah.
Oregon in general. But also there's a lot of Vietnamese kids and a lot of Chinese kids, but
There are?
yeah. I mean, if you're Asian, you're either Vietnamese or Chinese. Like, you don't see a lot
True.
of Korean kids.
Yeah.
I mean, in Beaverton.
In Beaverton, yeah, there is,
Yeah.
but in Clackamas, there isn't.
Okay. Yeah.
It's primarily Vietnamese or Chinese.
Okay.
Like, I think like half my class, their last name was Wen.
Man.
And so like, with them, I was always the fob kid.
Okay.
They literally came to me for math help.
Well, I mean, you were a math major too.
Okay, I was a math major. Like, yeah, like I did a lot of math when I was young.
Yeah.
But like literally, like I would be the stereotypical like fob kid that like white kids would go to and be like, hey, like, can you do my homework for me? And that's how I would get in.
Yeah, that's really interesting you say that because for me growing up, like, at home, I only spoke English, not Mandarin, Canto. I have Toisan background, but I didn't speak that either. And I also did not speak Korean because my parents, they spoke English to each other. So, like, growing up, I was just like, oh, I'm an American. And then I learned very quickly in middle school that no one saw me as an American.
Yeah.
They're just like, no, you're Asian.
Yeah.
You're going to do all these Asian things. Like,
Yep.
hey, can you help us with school or technology, or you're good at chess, right? I'm just like, I mean, like, I play chess, yeah, but all these
Quick
things.
disclaimer: as a kid, you know yakisoba noodles.
Yeah,
My parents did a teriyaki restaurant when I was young,
yeah.
and they did it until like last year. I would bring yakisoba noodles for lunch, and these white kids, they'd be like, "Yo, like, what'd you bring today? Dollar or cats?"
Oh,
Oh,
Yeah.
dang.
So like I grew up like that, so I was fully aware that I was Asian, like because they would make jokes like their jokes were like you don't know as a kid, but like
Yeah.
after you grow up and reflect back, it's like dang, like those comments were super racist.
Yeah.
yeah.
What?
That was always interesting too, because like I would say that I had a fusion of food growing up. Whether it was like I would come home and then I would hear my mom cooking something and it would smell 냄새 and it was like kimchi stew and it smelled absolutely disgusting when I was younger.
To be fair, kimchi does not smell that good.
No,
Yeah,
but
It tastes pretty good.
yeah, but on the table it would be like kimchi plus like chow fun or something like that, like a mix. And I was used to that. So then when I hear from Nabuki for the first time, he's just like, "Yeah, I had dim sum for the first time with my parents this year." I was just like, "What? That's like my
It
life."
was wild.
yeah. I mean, I think like growing up, like my circle is so Japanese American, even like just like so many kids that were either like first gen, second gen, that it was like I think I like even coming to college, I think it made me realize like I really was like in a Japanese American bubble, like that was rarely stepped outside of that. Like I went to like a Japanese American church, so all my friends like growing up in like youth group and stuff, they were all like full Japanese or half Japanese, half white, or half Japanese, half Korean, like something in there, and so I think it's like really interesting, even as you guys mentioned that too, and I think like as you guys were like talking about how like oh you were fully aware of at least like your Asianness. You know, I think mine was kind of like the opposite, where I feel like I always had to prove something. I didn't really feel like that much growing up, because growing up like at a Japanese American circle, and even like in a Japanese American circle had a lot of mixed kids. Like there were a lot of kids like me. Like they're whether they're half and they looked completely Japanese to they were half and they didn't look anything like it. But I think for me it was kind of when I went to like high school, like when I started going to public school, that like, I really realized it's like, oh, everyone just kind of like looks at me as like white.
Oh,
Honestly.
interesting. Okay.
Or even like I think the interesting thing is like to white people I'm Asian, and to Asian people I'm white. You know, so I think for so long, a lot of my life was like I felt like I was trying to prove something. I was trying to prove to Japanese people I was Japanese enough, but trying to prove to American people that I'm also American enough.
That's the exact same thing I feel with Chinese and Koreans. Because when I'm with Chinese people, they think I'm Korean. And then when I'm with Koreans, they're like, "Oh, you're so Chinese." You think that too, don't you?
See, okay, no, okay. I think for me, like that's a fair point, because I think I've always seen you as more Chinese.
Yeah, okay.
And then even for you, when I first met you, I was like, who's this white kid? Like that was my first thought. Like
Yeah.
I didn't even think, like I knew you were probably like Asian, but like I didn't really care about like what kind of Asian you were. I was just like, oh yeah, like there's this white kid here.
Yeah.
And then for you, I was like, oh yeah, like you were just always, you just seem all like more Chinese to me than Korean. Like from the moment that I met you at the office in sixth grade.
Oh, interesting.
So
Okay.
for me, it was hard. Like when you started speaking Korean, I was just like, why is this guy speaking Korean? And then you told me you're half Korean. I was like, what? Yeah.
Mind blowing.
Mind blowing stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always interesting.
I will say though, I think Koreans, like I'm including myself, like Koreans are very judgmental to other races.
Probably one of the most.
Yeah,
I would say.
I would say
Out of
so.
Asians.
Yeah.
Probably one of the
I would
most.
say so.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting because I feel like growing up as a kid, I feel like being in Japan, like being mixed back then, like when I was growing up was seen as like a bad thing. You know, you're like, oh, you're mixed. You're not full Japanese, therefore you're not complete. But I feel like it's interesting now kind of seeing culturally like where Japan is at. I mean, even thinking like in seeing athletes like Naomi Osaka, like I think her even being at such a big light was I think just so big in like being able to share with other people that like, oh, just because you don't look 100% Japanese doesn't mean that you are. And I think that's like something I've really been able to embrace is like when I think of even Japanese Americans in the US, like you have some that are fifth gen that can't even speak the language, and yet they're so tied to their culture, you know, whether they have like Obon or like all the different festivals. Like I think of all the Japanese Americans that I met in my time in college that come from California and Hawaii, and like while they can't speak it, they're very much tied into it. But I think like an interesting thing even seeing too is like these kind of second gen kids so that I grew up with around in Portland, where I feel like we're not as tied to it culturally, but I think what holds us together is the language that we speak. So like we speak more Japanese rather than kind of like doing the cultural like activities, like, you know, maybe you have like oshogatsu and like all the things in the festivals, which is like the New Year's celebrations and the New Year's foods that come with it. And I think for me, like that was really important and still kind of, I think, affirming to myself that I speak Japanese and I am Japanese. Like I think even amongst my siblings, like there's a spectrum of like I speak Japanese. I was also a Japanese major. I studied Japanese alongside with business at U of O. But then I have like siblings that like don't really care about speaking Japanese, and then like, but that doesn't negate the fact that they aren't Japanese. Like, and like that's what I love about being an Asian American, even as in general, is that it really is on a spectrum. You know, like just because you can speak the language more or less doesn't make you like more or less American, more or less Asian. You know, I think that's what I've really grown to understand and even just embrace is like, okay, like, yeah, maybe I can't speak the language 100% well, but this is what still connects me to my culture, like anime. Like honestly, I feel like it's pretty cliche. Honestly, everyone's kind of into it, but I think for me that was actually a very big moment of like embracing my culture in that way.
Yeah, that's really cool you say that. For me, because I didn't grow up speaking either language, I did take it upon myself to try to learn them at least. And at least trying to learn them definitely helped me to feel more in touch with my culture. But I definitely still very much like Chinese and Korean without that as well.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I did lion dancing and dragon dancing, which was really cool.
Nice.
And then for the Korean side, honestly, I didn't do as much. But I mean, is there anything like very specific like for? I feel like it's more food.
It's I mean, there's definitely like
Tennis.
wow, I don't know about that. For example, I was born June 6th, so that's my birthday.
Yeah.
June 6th is also Liberation Day for Koreans.
Oh, you're right.
But like that's something that I've never celebrated personally. Not because it wasn't on my birthday or anything like that. It's just like I mean I grew up here technically. So like it was never like a thing where it was like mentioned too much and things like that. But there are like different culture things like humble, you know, like things like there are those things that like my parents used to emphasize a lot when we were kids.
So like, traditions.
Yeah, those kind of tradition things. But like now it's just kind of like if you know then you know. If you don't then ask or don't ask. It's kind of like that.
That makes sense.
I will say that I think being Asian American is a huge blessing because like you said, it's like we are still part like we can't deny the fact that we are Koreans. And we don't have to deny that. Or we don't have to like lessen our heritage because we're only half or like because we grew up here and like we don't embrace such like for example, like I don't listen to a lot of K-pop. A lot of people think that's weird because I'm Korean and I don't listen to K-pop. I don't listen to K-pop. J. Cole all the way. But like yeah, that's just who I am and that doesn't make me less Korean.
Yeah.
100%. Like I'm still Korean and I still enjoy Korean food. I enjoy the culture. Yeah, like I want my wife to be Korean. So
yeah. Interesting one for you then. So out of the things we've talked about so far, traditions, food, and language. Which one has the highest priority for you in terms of like feeling connected to your culture and like make a list out of that, like top to bottom, most to least?
I think for me, I think tradition definitely feels at the bottom because I feel like Japanese just traditions weren't really like kind of they handed down to me that much. Like sure we have like the Natsu Matsuris, the summer festivals, and like you know we do celebrate like Oshogatsu and stuff, but even then that wasn't really emphasized that much to me as a kid. Maybe it's also because like you know my parents are Christians and a lot of those festivals are kind of rooted in more like Buddhism or like Shinto like religions. So I think maybe it's like in a part of like trying to kind of steer away from that. I'm still trying to find a toss up between like food and language. I think as a kid, language meant and connected me a lot to it. And I think it's because a lot of the people around me in my age group also spoke Japanese. So I think that was like what made me really feel Japanese. It's like, oh, like I'm talking to the people in my youth. And sure, it might be like Jinglish, you know, like I'm throwing Japanese and American words like into like one sentence. But I think that's what like really connected me back then. But I think now as a young adult, and I'm honestly like not in that Japanese American bubble anymore, like even like meeting you guys, you know, has like expanded so much of my understanding of what does it mean to be an Asian American. And so I think that has made me even realize too, it's like, oh, like even just like the beauty of being able to like share different foods. Like we were saying earlier, like even like my parents and I, we went to like dim sum this past Sunday for the first time. And like being able to see that like, and even we've talked about like, you know, how much important like food is to you. And even like,
that's my number one.
You know, like between like Chinese and even Korean cuisine, like I feel like it was so cool to be able to learn that. And so I think even that has kind of made me even lean into more into like my own cuisine. So I think for right now, I think food is definitely like the number way that it connects to my culture. And I think honestly, I mean, maybe I'll even add into this like the entertainment, like whether it's anime or it's like Japanese reality TV shows or it's like the different, you know, dramas or things like that. I feel like that also is still what really kind of keeps me connected. And honestly, it even like helps me keep the language a little bit too because I'm still hearing it. You know, I'm not at home where my dad is speaking Japanese to me and I'll reply to him. Like I'm not in that context anymore. I'm not even at a Japanese church anymore where I hear the sermon in Japanese. So I feel like in a way like that entertainment aspect has also kind of kept the language, but yeah, I think those are kind of like the three. Or I guess I've added another one fourth. But
I really like how you added that though, because for me, now that I think about entertainment, it'd probably go food first. growing up, my family was just so surrounded amongst food. So when I first went, I never like had gone to an Asian country up until like high school. And the first Asian country I went to was Japan. That's when I was like, oh, I'm gonna figure out like what Asian I am or who I connect with. I went to Japan and I was just like, oh, this is very foreign to me. The second one I went to was China, and I got there and I started eating the food and I was just like, oh, this tastes like home. And that's why I was like, okay, I got this. Korea too, I was like, okay, I got this. Yeah. So that's when I was just like, okay, I think food for me is a huge thing. Then I would agree entertainment, whether it's music or just the shows that you watch, or even like sports, like. Koreans like really into tennis, golf, and soccer. And like
I didn't know Koreans were into tennis. I guess
really,
I didn't know that.
Tennis is pretty big, but soccer as well.
And
So
soccer. Yeah.
that was pretty big. And then I would put traditions generally at the bottom though. While I definitely celebrate them, like they're not.
I feel like it's because we don't understand the depth to it as well, that it's hard to be like, oh wow, like this is like really cool, or even that like it wasn't such a big part of our lives that it's hard to say that even traditions. Like I think a lot of values got instilled, but when it comes to traditions, like since they weren't celebrated as much, then it's like, oh, to us it's just like, oh, okay, well, it's cool to see it and maybe even experience it for yourself, but it's not like that of an important value, or maybe even something that pass on.
I'm not even gonna lie, like I barely like stay with the American tradition things, you know, like
Okay.
yeah. So
I mean, for me, it's like traditions are slightly bigger because like Chinese New Year for me, we celebrate it really heavily. But I mean, outside of that, that's kind of
that's
it,
true.
though.
Yeah.
But that's kind of it though. Like I never celebrate like Chuseok or like Korean Chinese New or Korean New Year in general.
I do think though.
So it's like,
I do think though, because Chinese New Year have actually become more not Americanized, but like just more known in
it's more
America.
celebrated, I guess.
It is more celebrated, I think, because as Asian Americans living in America, like it becomes a bigger deal because it's become so well known too.
I guess so.
And it gives you a reason to be like, hey, like let's celebrate it.
Yeah, but I guess I'm talking about just like my family in general. Like, we celebrate it. I definitely think like what your family focused on when you were younger definitely has an influence on that.
Definitely.
But definitely for me, it's like food, and then now way more entertainment. You know, you can go up to like any type of ethnic or cultural person and be like, at least for food or entertainment, and they'll generally know what you're talking about. Most people know what kimchi is now, or at least anime, right? So
and I think it's so cool because like those things are also just so easy to be shared as well. You know, like honestly, like so many Asian Americans have watched anime. So many Asian Americans listen to K-pop. Like so many Asian Americans have been exposed to so many different aspects of like Asian American culture. Like I feel like it's really cool that as Asian Americans, I feel like it's not just limited to like a singular cultural experience, but I feel like it's almost, I think that's even the beauty of being like mixed, is like it's just bringing together multiple different cultures, multiple different values into like something that's different and new. And I think that's like what's really cool is like I even think of like kind of like I almost kind of even see like our generation, the generation above us, kind of like pioneering like what does it mean to be an Asian American, because like we don't see that many mixed people, whether it's in media or just even in general, like the people around us. Like at least like for most of the people I know, there aren't many mixed people older than me, but there are definitely a lot of mixed people younger than me.
yes.
So I think it makes me think of like, and even a lot of my time, like as we were in college and even the same like Christian group, like even a big passion of mine, I was like, how can we create a space where Asian Americans, and even for me specifically, like mixed Asian Americans, feel like the space is for them. That it's not just for the full Asian Americans, it's for the people that are half white and half blank. And I think that was just really even cool to see it grow into a space where honestly everyone from all different spectrums of life and even of different cultural backgrounds are able to just like come together. So yeah, I feel like that's the cool part of being Asian American, I think, is it's not just one set thing, but rather it's a mishmash of a bunch of different things just being able to come together. I mean, that's why like during the pandemic and even before, like subtle Asian traits like that popped off so much, because as much as like, you know, like we're all like, you know, whether it's Korean American, Chinese American, Japanese American, like there are also a lot of just Asian like values that are like such a big thread amongst all of us that I think
in
it
other
really
countries too,
it's just like I think it all brought us together, like, you know, taking off your shoes before you walk into the house, using the dishwasher as a drying rack, you know, like saving like the tissue papers from like stores and putting them in like your like glove compartment, you know, like I feel like there's so many aspects that draw us together, you know, that I think it just makes us feel more even like together, you know, especially like even just seeing what happened in like like different minority communities during the pandemic. You know, I think it's like it was really a cool thing to even just see the community come together.
I agree with that. Like,
And also, I think, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
nah, you're fine. Go for it.
I also think like being an Asian American, whether you're or like mixed or full, like whatever it is, like it implies that you are from an immigrant family, somehow connected to an immigrant family.
Yeah.
And like being an immigrant here in America, like it gets tough. And the way that you grow up, it makes you question yourself a lot. It makes you feel like you don't have a place to belong sometimes. Even at home, when you're supposed to feel like you're supposed to belong, I mean, even like for me personally, and I know some other people, like they didn't feel at home when they were at home. So like, I think, like you said, like when it came to ministry and things like that in college too, like I've always dreamed, and that's what I've always strived for too, like creating a community where it was like, where you feel safe to just be yourself, and to tell your story, because being an immigrant here is not that easy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of obstacles that you have to go through. I mean, like, thank God, right? And like I'm very grateful for my parents for doing that for sure. But like, I mean, and they've gone through their trials as well, but because they were going through their trials, we also had to go through trials because they went through their trials.
Definitely.
So like the fact that we had a space like that to share and to like really connect through that too, I think like what was really special, and what was one of the common things that like really connected us to be together, I think.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, just the definition of Asian American in general is really interesting too. Because I was even wondering if that was actually a thing, right? Because at least for Korean Americans or Chinese Americans, you go back and they're like, oh, you're not Chinese, you're an American. Oh, you're not a Korean, you're an American, right? Yeah. So as I went there, I came to the conclusion like there actually is a subcategory of something specifically like called Asian American, where like it transcends ethnic and cultural backgrounds, and it is like a subculture in itself, which is so interesting. And you know, that's what I think we are, at least at a large level, right? Definitely with subtle hints of Korean, Japanese, Chinese, Korean in the background as well. But overall, it's like Asian American too. And I mean, I think it'd be really interesting someday to like see what like other Asians who have immigrated to other places, whether it's like Australia or Canada. I'm so interested because that's like subtle Asian traits.
I was like, I didn't even realize like when I saw subtle Asian traits, I feel like I just defaulted to assume like everyone's Asian American, but no, there's like these, I don't even know what I'll just call Asians in like Australia or Asians in Canada. Yeah, you know how I'm like, or even like Asians in like England and Europe, and I'm like, oh wow, like it makes me think too of like what does that Asian experience like look like in all these different countries.
I got a friend in Bolivia.
Really?
Yeah. And that was like it's like the randomest thing in my life.
Yeah. So I definitely want to like think about that a little bit more. But anyway, before we get into all that type of stuff, dating. Yeah. So for the record, I am not dating.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Man, it must be so terrible just having so much free time.
Yeah.
Can't relate.
Can't relate.
Oh, really? I thought you were single.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, this man's getting Nobuki's getting married.
So I am engaged right now.
What?
That is wild. We actually went to go fit in our suits.
Oh yeah. It's the whole reason why we're all three together even.
Yeah.
Get fitted, looking nice.
That's right. It's been a while.
Special day.
Yep.
That's right. And man, are you
I'm currently it's complicated.
Okay. You know, but that's also the case for people of multi-ethnic backgrounds and cultures. Yeah.
It is.
Transition.
Wow.
It's so smooth.
Wow. It's so complicated. So
okay, hold on. It's not actually that complicated.
Yeah?
Oh yeah?
I'm just saying.
Please talk say more. No.
I mean, please, no, actually, say more.
Say more.
We're just talking. We were just talking.
Oh, you and the girl.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought we were talking about the cultural.
Yeah, me too.
Oh no, that's complicated.
Yeah, that's what I was like. I was talking about.
I think that's complicated.
Yeah.
Do you actually want me to go into why it's complicated?
No. It's
okay.
We can talk about that over dinner tonight.
No. I'm talking about like the cultural.
Oh.
Complicated.
Yeah, from a Korean American perspective, what's that like for you?
Oh yeah, I think it's interesting because I think as an Asian American at least man, like you've definitely talked about how like somebody a girl who is American, like they don't really like go for Asian American guys. And so um I don't know, like me personally, I've never been attracted to an American girl, or woman, because it's important to, you know,
Differentiate.
It is important.
but like I've had friends who are personally attracted to American women, and like they've talked about the struggles of like, oh, like I like this person and we're talking, but like I don't know, like she sees me as like a brother or just a friend or kind of like that. Like American women, like they don't usually give the benefit of the doubt to Asian American men, is what I've heard. And so I think that is kind of complicating, and just kind of like, I don't know. But I feel like I don't really know what else to say about that because personally I've never been in those kind of situations. Like,
Well, let's put it this way: would you be willing to date outside of your culture, right?
um,
As a full Korean or a full Korean American?
I have dated an American girl when I was in high school.
Okay.
And that was weird for me personally. Like it was just like, and when I say like the immigrant kind of, you know, like it has an impact in your life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like she just can't understand where I'm coming from, why I have the values that I
And
do.
is that a deal breaker for you then?
And yeah, I mean, for me personally, like the reason I want to date somebody who is Korean is because they understand where those values kind of come from.
Yeah, there's like that unspoken.
Yeah.
You just get it. You know?
Yeah, and it's not like you necessarily even have to agree with it. It's just like I just want that person to understand like where it comes from.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I think it's like, I think in that's why it is hard for me personally to like be attracted to like an American woman. But yeah, I don't really see myself like that. And honestly, I would very much highly prefer somebody who is Korean.
Okay, but what about other Asians? I mean, like similar ethnicity, but very different cultures, right? So are you willing to date like potentially Chinese or Vietnamese or Thai?
I'm not close to the idea. But I think when we're talking about like the order of importance or like the way that we engage
traditions.
with our culture, like language it's third for me. So like I want to be able to speak Korean with my future wife, you know, and I want my future kids to speak Korean.
What about a weeaboo who has learned the language and is
No. Like respectfully, like I have a lot of respect for, like, you remember Alana?
Yeah.
Like she spoke pretty well.
Good Korean.
Yeah, and like
Fully
I have a
American.
lot of respect for her, but
Yeah.
for me personally, like I just can't like I can't date
And I
somebody.
think there's a difference too between people that kind of fetishize the culture
Right.
versus like people that like actually like respect the culture, and that's why they want to. Like, I
She
feel like
really
people,
respected it, yeah.
and I honestly, I like totally agree. Like even as you were saying too, it's like I think there's some people that can just make it weird. Like it's like almost like they only see like the Asian part. Like they don't even see like all the other amazing things that you bring. You know.
Yeah.
Versus like people that actually like respect and honor that part.
Yeah. Even today, I went to this award ceremony because my sister won a scholarship. It's like a medical scholarship thing.
Congrats.
And it's for like specifically Koreans here in Oregon.
Yeah.
And so I went because my sister arrives tonight, and so she couldn't make it to the ceremony, so I went on her behalf. And the board members, they were primarily white.
What?
Interesting.
There was like one Korean lady, and then the other two were white. At least the ones that were present today. And like, I don't know. I mean, like, I think it's great that they think that the Korean culture is so great, and like they've lived there for some time and things like that, and I think that's awesome. But you can definitely tell it's just like, I don't know. It's like they were trying to like show off like how much they know about the culture, and just like, and maybe that wasn't their intention for sure. But I think my first instinct is to take it that way, even if they don't mean it that way. And like I do feel bad in that. Like I apologize that I take it that way.
No.
But I mean, like I do. It's just first instinct for me. Like I can't lie about that. You know. Like,
Yeah. Have you seen that like YouTube video? I think it's like College Humor where it's like a panel of people of like the same race or like Asian, and it's like half Asian, full Asian, like 1/4 Asian, and then they're trying to discern like if this one person is considered Asian or not. And she's like,
Oh, the countdown.
yeah.
The countdown.
She's like an eighth,
Yeah.
and she's like,
Toast.
yeah,
100%.
and then it cuts to like the black one is like, I'm an eighth, and they're like, you're black. Yeah, kind of like that. It's
Yeah.
interesting too.
It's but I think going back to dating, I think it's kind of like that where it's just like I appreciate your respect and your what is it your respect for the culture, for my culture.
Okay.
But personally for me, I want somebody who actually
Like lived
grew up
through
and
it.
lived out this Korean culture as I have,
Yeah.
because even like Korean entertainment,
Oh,
there's like certain humor in there
yeah.
that like
Mm-hmm.
people don't get.
Yeah, that's true.
A lot of like cultural jokes that just kind of
Yeah.
get missed if you don't like understand the nuances
Yeah.
of the culture.
Nabuki, how's it been for you though? Because Nabuki, since he's getting married, is engaged to someone who is not Japanese American.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm engaged to someone who's Latina, and so I think like even that experience was really interesting. As I think there are a lot of aspects of our culture that definitely are similar. You know, like the love for family, the love for food. You know, I feel like that's very similar. But there's definitely a lot of aspects in cultural aspects that are very, very different, you know? Like, I think for myself, like, I think, like, Latino people are, like, tend to be, like, more, like, outspoken and expressive, whereas Japanese people are like, a lot more reserved. And I think, like, that took a little time, like, getting used to. And I think that even kind of express itself in the way, like, we engage in conflict. Like, she's someone that, like, loves to express, like, how she feels, you know? And, like, it's just expressive just generally, whereas, like, I tend to, like, reserve my emotions a little bit more. You know, things like that, or like I found this one like this is interesting too. Of like even like Mexican food is like really handsy. You know, like you like tacos. Like when you think about it, tacos, burritos, like, things like that for food. Like it's really handsy, right?
Yeah.
Like Japanese food,
I
I'm
was
like,
about to say like, what you mean handsy?
it's like you just use your hands a lot. I didn't know how to describe it, but it's like, but like Japanese food, I'm just so used to like touching everything like distance. Like I eat it with a chopstick, you know. So like, even like that like small cultural aspect was I think just really different. But I feel like the cool thing, and even the cool thing about being mixed is like I feel like you get to bring in the best parts of the different cultures, and even like the negative parts are parts that like you can like almost like not go alongside with, or you can continue to grow based off like even seeing their own culture and being like, oh, like I could learn from that, or I could grow from that, you know. And so I think that's been like really cool, as like we've even just kind of like blended our cultures together and being able to see that I think is really important. But as you're saying, like even like that understanding that comes with it, like I think because we both came from very different cultures, that was an additional step that even took for us. It was like, okay, understanding our own cultural backgrounds, you know. It was really cool because last year I got to go to Mexico to see her family for the first time, and it was really interesting because I think there are a lot of parts of like Hispanic culture that kind of like understood, you know, but I think for me it was like, I don't know if this is her personality or this is her culture, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so being there and being surrounded by the culture, it even for me I was like, oh, like it was kind of cool to see like, oh, this is like why you are like the way you are, you know, like being able to see like the way her family interacts and tells stories and laughs and just engages with each other, I think was just really cool. So, but I think the beauty of like even being mixed and even going into this like interracial marriage is like we get to bring all the best parts of our cultures, and honestly even some of the negative parts that we get to kind of reconcile with that and even grow each other in the ways that our cultures are different, and that and become just better people because of that.
That's really great that you see it in a positive light, because for me, as I was growing up in a half home, I would say I definitely also was exposed to the best and a little bit of the worst of both cultures as well. And I feel like I've definitely gotten to kind of pick and choose what I really want to take as mine and leave behind as well. So kind of going with that, like as you begin to want to think about kids in the future, what are things that like you really are going to want to carry forward and potentially leave behind? Because, you know, you're going to really have to pick and choose since you really like decide on that, right?
Wow. Definitely. I know. Like, I think I know for myself, honestly, and I think for almost it's a sad thing, but I think language is just something that's not going to be passed on as well.
Really?
Like, I'm not, so even with the thing of like, yes, I was a Japanese major, but I'm not surrounded by Japanese people anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't use the language anymore. Like, there's even an instance like where I ran into some like Japanese foreign exchange students the other week, and I was talking and I was like, I can't find the words anymore that I used to have.
Wow.
I think it's like a little bit sad for me, and I've honestly been trying to find ways of like continuing to engage my culture, like even just like like when I talk to my parents now, talking in Japanese, because my mom's a translator, so she actually speaks Japanese fluently as well. So
And your mom is white, right?
yeah, so my mom is white, but my dad is Japanese. But I think it's like that's kind of one way that I've really kind of continued to stay in touch with my language. But I just feel like the language wasn't. I think it was a big part of like my church childhood, but in terms of at home life, the Japanese language wasn't a big part. So that I think when I think of what's going to be passed on, like I think the language is going to be like super like they're going to know words and phrases, but they won't like know conversational things.
That's interesting you say that, because initially when you were talking earlier, it's like language was something really big for you growing up, and you're saying that as you pass it down, as you're passing things down to your kids, that's not necessarily a front focus, right?
Yeah.
So then what are going to be focuses? It seems like you're leaning towards Japanese culture specifically a little bit, since we are living in America, right? What are those things that you really want to like pass down to them so that they keep some root of Japanese culture?
Yeah, I think one is definitely the food. Like for me, like when I cook, I basically exclusively like cook Japanese food. Because
I agree.
I mean, Japanese food is the best. And, you know, but like I think it's like this the cultural context I even grew up in. Like my family also only ate Japanese food. Like my mom, even though she's the one that cooked at home, she also only made Japanese food. And so I think for me, food is going to be a big part. I think the entertainment, honestly, like, you know, whether it's like little cartoons I used to watch in Japan, like Doraemon, Sazae-san, like, or just even like, you know, like anime, you know, like I think that's something I love to, honestly, it's just something I enjoy and love so much. Like I love to be able to share that love for that with my kids. And if they don't like it, they don't like it, you know, but I think it'd be cool if like, that'd be a cool kind of just like cultural connection that we get to have. I think it's interesting even too, because it's not just my own Japanese American culture that is being imparted and brought to like our kids too. It's like it's also like Brenda's like Latina culture, you know. And I know that for her, she definitely wants her kids to speak Spanish. Like that is something that's important to her.
And that's her first language too, right?
Yeah, so Spanish is her first language as well. So even for me, it's like, you know, I've been like, you know, doing like Spanish like Duolingo and stuff to like be able to like even like learn her language.
Duolingo works.
I would say if I was consistent with it, maybe it'd work. Honestly, I'm gonna say I'm not consistent. It's helpful, you know. Like when I went to Mexico, I was able to pick out, you know, what I would know, like where they're going and what we're doing vaguely. But
That's progress. I mean, how long did you do it for?
I mean, I was only doing it for like 3 months at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Duolingo is not sponsored.
not
yet.
sponsored yet.
Yes.
Hashtag sponsored in the future.
But I mean, hey.
But yeah, I think like, but for her, I think it's interesting. Like, I think food is something she also wants to pass down, but she honestly hates cooking. So I feel like I love cooking, which is why I even like, even in our marriage, like I even talked about this with her too. Like I definitely have a desire to learn Mexican food and learn how to cook that for her. But in terms of my own, like right now, kind of like what feels like home and like what's my comfort food, it's still definitely Japanese food. But I think when it comes to what we want to pass down, I think for us both, it's definitely food. And then I think kind of like the entertainment culture of like Japan, you know, when it comes to anime or music. And then for her, I think the language is really important to pass down.
It's interesting you talked specifically about like entertainment and culture, because I'm also interested about like values or characteristics as well, because those can vary drastically, right?
Yeah.
In Chinese culture, like I mean, growing up, family was really big, and serving, specifically like acts of service, where my grandparents always continued to cook or take care of like the grandkids, whereas, and that's specifically like Canto culture. In Mandarin culture or Taiwanese culture, it's not like that. Or like in Korean culture, honorifics, respecting your elders, it was like next level.
Yeah.
Even in Asian culture, it's like, oh my gosh, right? It's huge. So even things like that is like, what things do you expect to like potentially see your kids pass down with that, or is it just from you, right?
Yeah,
just
definitely. No, I think for Brenda, honestly, like my fiance, like I think, and this was one aspect I didn't realize was big. I thought it was her personality, but I just realized honestly just big in like Latino culture for just like gift giving. Like honestly, like yeah, sure, like Japanese people kind of like bring a gift for like, you know, when they come and visit your house, you know, they're bringing like you know, osenbei, like Japanese snacks and stuff. But like for her, like when I arrived, everywhere I'd go, I'd get like a gift. Like I visited an aunt and it'd be like 30 minutes. I'd be like, oh, here, like take this. Hey, like bring this home. Like, and it's like, it's nothing big. It's nothing crazy. Like it might be like a bracelet or like, you know, like an earring or like, you know, like small things. Like they would constantly give us gifts everywhere. And I think that's definitely even like a value that I think she just loves. Just like, or I'd even call it like a love language. It was like really big for her. It was like the act of gift giving. Whereas for me, being a Japanese American, I think even as you were kind of alluding to, even just almost as Asian Americans, like acts of service is huge, you know, like for my like my parents, like if you offer to wash the dishes when you come over and you're like, you know, a significant other, like you've won, you know, like that's huge. And I think that even shows that like that's something you want to be like as family being a big value. It's like, hey, like, I'm a part of this family. I'm not just a guest, I'm a part of it as well. I think that's something that's the two big values that I think I really want to continue to pass down. And not even just like the culture vibe, but even like I think my faith too. Like I think that's something that's really important that I think we both want to continue to pass down to our kids. And even just seeing like the way our culture and our faith intersect and interact, I think are really interesting. As I think like, and I just even see her like being someone that's a lot more touched with just kind of like her emotional side.
Yeah.
Whereas like being an Asian American, like even like I'll be honest, like I don't think I've ever seen like my dad cry, ever. Like even like my grandpa passed like away a few years ago. I at least from what I can remember, like I didn't even see him cry then. You know, I think he was always someone that kind of toughed it out. You know, like especially since he was a pastor at a church. You know, like whatever needed to be done, he was there. You know, but I think almost the negative thing that I was taught was like how I feel doesn't matter as long as the other person is taken care of. Or even in specific Christian Asian American culture, it's as long as I'm loving other people like Jesus did, then how I feel doesn't matter because at least that's what I'm supposed to do, right?
Yeah, love others, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, love others, love your neighbor,
and so
come first.
Yeah, so I think like something that was just, and this is the negative part of our culture that I think I've been undoing, is like learning that how I feel matters too. My thoughts and my opinions matter too, and because of that, and I feel like I feel so blessed that I've been surrounded by so many amazing people that I think it's a space that I can continue to be honest. Yeah, the people right here, it's like that I can continue to be real with, I can be honest with how I feel. And so I think there's definitely like a lot of things I want to pass on to our kids. And I think it's even something that's like a continued conversation as well. You know, as we're starting to learn more about each other and even as we're kind of exposing and learning more about each other's cultures, you know, I think it's definitely something that's a continued conversation.
Yeah, I want to touch on the faith one a little bit more actually, because even within Christian circles, faith can look very different from culture to culture.
Yeah.
Nabuki and I, we went on a vision trip with our ministry, Epic Ministries, Asian Americans passionate about.
We are a community. We are a multicultural community passionate about connecting people to Jesus.
That's what it is. Dang it, I should know that.
Yeah.
We went to Vietnam because our ministry was at the University of Oregon was predominantly at the time Korean Americans and Chinese Americans, right? Yeah, barely any Japanese Americans even, right? Yeah, but then we were just like, why aren't there any Vietnamese or Thai or other Apasu sort of cultures coming to
or like even just like represented,
right?
Yeah,
in our Epic.
Yeah, and we were just like, what's going on here? So we took a vision trip to Vietnam, and that's where we learned like, oh wow, the way that they do things, the way that their faith is like at their core rooted is very different than ours was.
Yeah.
I think the biggest difference I saw, like at least for Chinese Koreans, is like initially when you want to make a relationship, it's like, oh, how do you think? What do you know? Do our the things that we think and know like align? Oh yes, like then I will initiate a relationship with you and we'll see if like we vibe and stuff like that. But as long as we're like connected in the same like pathway, then let's go for it. Versus what I found or I thought in Vietnamese culture, it's like, yo, are we cool or not? Hey, do we have like, am I chill with you? Okay, I can vibe with you. Now I'll start to speak my thoughts more into like how I actually feel and stuff. So it was completely the opposite. Once we started to notice that, the way that we interacted and started building relationships with other ethnicities, aside from our own, could change. It was very different, I would say. Did you notice that a little bit?
I think so too, yeah. I mean, I think like it's been interesting because like I feel like I got to experience three very like distinct, and this isn't like pertaining to the vision trip, but I feel like over my time in my life, it's like really interesting where in my childhood, I experienced a lot of the Japanese American Christian culture, you know? And then in college, like especially with like Epic Movement where we're at, there's a lot of Korean American Christian culture. And then for about a year and a half, I was in Arizona where I got to experience a lot of like the Chinese American Christian culture. I think it's just like super interesting because I feel like the way each approaches the relationship with Jesus is very different. And I think it's because of the way their culture kind of intertwines with the relationship with Jesus. Like, I don't know, like what have you kind of seen with like kind of the Korean American culture and like just your relationship with Jesus and even like the Korean American church too, you know, like what does that look like for you?
Personally for me, I think my perspective and view of Koreans have been severely stained by the the fact that I grew up in a Korean church.
Mm.
I think personally for me, in my experience, Korean churches have been a place where it's like you have to show up perfect. You know how we talk about church as a place to, like welcome people who are in need, right? It's supposed to be the hospital that, where the broken people come and they feel like they can be there and be safe. No, it felt like a place where where I came and I had to prove myself to be a good enough Christian and things like that. And so like, that's the kind of culture that I grew up in. And so like now thinking back, it's like I'm burdening myself with that. And like, and honestly, I think my relationship with God was very unhealthy.
It's interesting you say that. It's because in Chinese culture, I went to Chinese Baptist church like growing up, so I generally have like a Chinese background in my faith. It was very intellectual and cerebral. Like every single week, it was just like, oh, what are your thoughts on salvation or heaven and hell, or like, are we going to heaven 100%? Yes or no? Is predestination a thing? Dive deep into it. Are you a season or a continuous in terms of prophecy? And it's just like, wait, what are these things? What does that even mean? Right? And if you didn't have the intellect or the facts to back it up, it was seen as like, oh, I don't know about your faith. It was more about like God the Father, the Son, and the Bible versus the Holy Spirit.
Oh, interesting. I feel like that's so interesting you bring that up, because like I feel like the different ways our cultures kind of almost evaluate how good of a Christian you are is like, I call it like the head, heart, and hands.
Yeah.
Right? Like head knowledge, definitely very Chinese American. Like they're almost like, how much do you know? And the more that you know, almost kind of equates to, oh, you're a better Christian because you know more about God, right? Hands, I feel like it's very Korean because it's all about what are you doing? Right? Are you going on missions? Are you going to the 1040 window? Are you going to the unreached nations to reach
how much
people
are
for
you
Jesus?
offering in your offering?
Yeah, it's like, how much are you sacrificing? I feel like it's like, that's just been like super interesting as I've even just experienced that. But I feel like for Japanese Americans too, it's almost like, how passionate are you, right? Or like, how much do you love Jesus? Like, it's all about kind of like as much as it was weird talking about how just now I was talking about like, oh, we're not very in touch with like our emotions. It's just like, oh, like how much do you love walking with Jesus? Like, having that heart for him and yearning after him and seeking after him. And I think it's also just very interesting too, because I think even the cultural context of Japanese Christians in Japan, like you don't really have that space to be able to grow in your faith intellectually. Like we don't have that many churches. Like if you look at even how many Japanese churches do you know in Oregon, right? Probably just mine, right? Which is actually like, it's the only one of the two Japanese churches in Oregon.
I think if I'm being honest, I don't really know just in the US a lot of Japanese population.
Because there isn't, right? Like there just isn't. And so I feel like it's almost like it's hard to grow intellectually when the resources aren't available there. So right. So like then what do they base it off? It's like, how passionate are you? Because that's kind of all they have sometimes,
Interesting. So when you're interacting with other cultures with your faith, like how do you go about that then, right? Because I think generally each of us come from very different background in that, and it's like, how do you engage or talk with others about it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like it's definitely a balance, right? Like, like yes, having the heart, having the hands, having the knowledge is good, but it needs to be balanced, right? And so I think something that I found is like, sometimes the Chinese, especially working in ministry, I worked with Chinese Americans, I worked with Japanese Americans, I worked with Korean Americans, Like, I think it's really interesting that with like Chinese Americans, it's often bringing them back to like, what does it mean to walk with Jesus? Like bringing them back to that heart, right? Because sometimes it can be so easy. And I think it can be easy as Asian Americans just to be like, oh, I'm doing it, right? So that must be, it's better than nothing, right? But I mean, look at the Pharisees, right? They did everything right and they did it to the T. And yet Jesus continually calls them out. And so I think it's really interesting that even I actually discipled 2 Chinese American guys when I was I guess they're Taiwanese Americans, so a little bit different. But being able to like disciple people that are kind of in that same like culture vein, like it was often about like, a bunch. You've read the Bible front and back so many times. You know your theology, you know your apologetics. Great, but like do you love Jesus? Like more. Great, but how does that translate into how you live your life? How does that translate to your own personal relationship with Jesus?
Yeah.
And like with Japanese Americans, it's all about, okay, you have this passion, you have this fire. Now we need to hone that in, right? Now we need to give you the tools to be able to act. And I think, and I don't know if you can speak on Korean Americans, those are the 2 spaces that I mainly like interacted with, but I feel like even for Korean Americans, like sometimes it's like, you have so much like hands and stuff that you want to do that like you often just need to like take a step back and be like, wait, like, where's my own relationship with God?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I feel like I've personally like gained so much new perspectives, especially being able to serve with you two. Like you guys have changed my perspective on what it means to have a relationship with God a lot. And so like I think that was the beauty of Epic for me personally. I mean, I think we've all had our struggles with Epic, if I'm being honest, but at the same time, I'm very grateful for what Epic stood for, because it allowed me to meet new people like you guys and other people as well, where I got to see a lot of new different perspectives on what it means to be a follower of God. I like that definition a lot better than Christian.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, what does it mean for you to walk with God? Like, what has that look like in your life, and what does that continue to look for you now? Like, I've heard so many different stories and so many different ways that they have served, and so many ways that they have chose to love God, that it's just like, wow, like maybe like me doing all of these works, being, you know, I've been a worship leader since I was 8th grade. Like, and so I think, yeah, I just think that's the beauty of it. Like all of those cultures kind of coming in together.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, thanks for sharing so much, guys. I mean, the whole point of this was like to bridge the gap between different cultures, especially as more people are starting to date interracially and their kids. It's like, what is that going to look like, right? So the whole point here is to bridge the gap between different ethnicities. What does that look like between different ones? And it seems like we all have very different experiences, which is so cool to see. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, man.
Yeah.
Love this.
So we'll see how it goes, but we appreciate it. All right.
Thank you.
All right. See you later.